They say some dresses are dangerous. Clara Bennett never believed it until the night she wore crimson to a penthouse party and caught the attention of Adrian Volkov, the city's most feared mafia boss. His warning was delivered with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Walk past me in that dress again, and you won't make it to the balcony." She thought he was flirting. He was declaring ownership. What followed wasn't a love story. It was a war. And Clara, the girl no one ever noticed, became the only thing a killer couldn't afford to lose. If you want to see how far this story of danger and obsession goes, stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city so I can see how far Clara's journey has traveled across the world. The problem with being invisible your entire life is that when someone finally sees you, you don't know whether to run or stand still. Clara Bennett had spent 26 years perfecting the art of going unnoticed. She wasn't ugly, just unremarkable, in that particular way that made people's eyes slide past her in crowded rooms. Average height, average build, brown hair that she wore in the same practical ponytail every day. A wardrobe composed entirely of grays and beiges, carefully selected to blend into any background. She worked as a data analyst at a mid-sized insurance firm, the kind of job where you could disappear into spreadsheets for 8 hours and never have a single meaningful human interaction. Her coworkers knew her name, but nothing else. She ate lunch alone, not because she was unliked, but because she was simply forgettable. Clara had made peace with her invisibility years ago. It was safer that way, quieter, less complicated. Until the night everything changed. It started with an invitation she almost declined. "Please, Clara, you have to come," her friend Meredith had begged over the phone. "It's my engagement party. You're one of my oldest friends. I can't celebrate without you there." Meredith was the opposite of Clara in every conceivable way. Vibrant, social, effortlessly beautiful. They'd been roommates in college, thrown together by random housing assignment, and somehow the friendship had stuck despite their fundamental differences. Meredith collected people the way others collected stamps. Clara had always been grateful to be included in that collection, even if she didn't quite understand why. "I don't know," Clara had hedged. "A penthouse party? That's not really my scene. All those people—" "Exactly. So many people that you can blend right in. Come on, wear something nice. Drink expensive champagne on someone else's dime. Support your friend. Please?" Clara had agreed, mostly because saying no would have required more energy than saying yes. The dress was Meredith's idea, too. "Absolutely not," Meredith had declared when Clara showed up at her apartment the afternoon of the party, wearing a beige shift dress that looked like it had been designed by someone who hated joy. "You are not wearing that to my engagement party. I won't allow it." "What's wrong with it?" Clara had protested weakly. "It's a crime against fashion, and I'm calling the police." Meredith had grabbed Clara's hand and dragged her to the bedroom, flinging open her closet with dramatic flair. "We're the same size. You're borrowing something that doesn't make you look like you're attending a funeral for color itself." The crimson dress had materialized like a dare. It was simple in construction, but devastating in effect. A slip dress with thin straps cut on the bias, so it clung to curves Clara didn't realize she had. The color was rich and deep, like wine or blood or sin. The hemline ended mid-thigh, showing more leg than Clara had displayed in public since she was 12. "I can't wear this," Clara had whispered, staring at her reflection. "You absolutely can and will," Meredith had countered. "Clara, you're beautiful. You've just spent your whole life trying to convince yourself otherwise. One night, wear the dress, see what happens." What happened was that Clara felt naked. The penthouse belonged to Meredith's fiancé's family, old money, the kind that whispered rather than shouted. The elevator ride to the top floor was 67 seconds of Clara second-guessing every decision she'd made in the past 48 hours. The doors opened onto a sprawling space of floor-to-ceiling windows, marble floors, and people who looked like they'd been genetically engineered to belong there. Clara felt the weight of her visibility immediately. People looked at her. Actually looked. Their eyes didn't slide past. A man in an expensive suit let his gaze linger a moment too long. 2 women by the bar appraised her with the cool calculation of predators sizing up potential competition. It was terrifying. Meredith found her within 30 seconds, squealing with delight and pulling her into the crowd. Introductions were made and immediately forgotten. Clara accepted a glass of champagne she didn't want and tried to become invisible again with limited success. The dress wouldn't let her. She was making her third circuit of the room, looking for a quiet corner to disappear into, when she walked past him. Adrian Volkov. She didn't know his name yet, didn't know anything about him except that he was standing alone near the windows, holding a glass of whiskey, and radiating the kind of danger that made smart people cross to the other side of the street. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with the build of someone who understood violence intimately. Dark hair, sharp features, and eyes that were an unusual shade of gray, like winter ice over deep water. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than Clara's car, tailored precisely to his frame. Everything about him screamed power, money, and barely controlled menace. Clara's first instinct was to avoid him entirely, but she was already committed to her trajectory across the room, and changing course would be obvious, awkward. So she did what she'd done her entire life. She put her head down and kept walking, trusting in her invisibility to protect her. Except she wasn't invisible anymore. Stop! The single word cut through the ambient noise of the party like a knife. It wasn't loud, but it carried absolute authority, the kind of voice that was accustomed to being obeyed without question. Clara's feet stopped moving before her brain caught up with the command. She turned slowly, confused, and found herself pinned by that ice-gray stare. Adrian Volkov was looking at her the way a wolf looks at prey, with complete focus, calculating distance and trajectory, and exactly how long it would take to close the gap between them. "Come here," he said quietly. It wasn't a request. Clara's pulse kicked into high gear. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. She took 2 steps toward him, then 3, until she was close enough to smell his cologne, something dark and expensive and vaguely threatening. "What's your name?" he asked. "Clara?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Clara Bennett." "Clara." He repeated it slowly, like he was tasting it. His eyes traveled down the length of her body with deliberate thoroughness, lingering on the crimson fabric that suddenly felt far too thin. When his gaze returned to her face, there was something new in his expression, something possessive. "That dress is dangerous." "It's just a dress," Clara managed. "No." His lips curved into something that might have been a smile on a less dangerous face. "It's a declaration. Do you know what you're declaring, Clara Bennett?" She didn't know how to answer that, didn't understand the rules of whatever game they were playing. Adrian took a step closer, erasing the safe distance between them. He was close enough now that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the faint scar that cut through his left eyebrow. "If you walk past me in that dress again," he said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "you won't make it to the balcony." Clara's breath caught. "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." His eyes held hers, unblinking. "Go back to wherever you came from, Clara. This party isn't for you." The dismissal stung more than it should have. Clara felt her face flush. Whether from embarrassment or anger, she couldn't tell. "I was invited," she said, lifting her chin with more courage than she felt. "I don't doubt it." Adrian's expression didn't change. "But you don't belong here. These people are sharks, and you—" He paused, his gaze softening almost imperceptibly. "You're something else entirely." Before Clara could formulate a response, Meredith appeared at her elbow, slightly drunk and beaming. "There you are. I've been looking everywhere for—" She stopped short when she noticed Adrian, and something shifted in her expression. Fear, maybe, or recognition. "Mr. Volkov, I didn't realize you were— thank you for coming." Adrian's attention shifted to Meredith with the smooth efficiency of a predator changing targets. "Congratulations on your engagement," he said, his voice perfectly cordial now, all trace of menace carefully concealed. "Your fiancé is a lucky man." "Thank you," Meredith said, her grip tightening on Clara's arm. "That's very kind. Clara, can I borrow you for just a moment?" She didn't wait for an answer, physically steering Clara away from Adrian and toward the opposite side of the room. Once they were safely distant, Meredith's smile dropped. "What the hell were you doing talking to Adrian Volkov?" she hissed. "Who?" "Adrian Volkov." Meredith glanced over her shoulder as if checking whether he could hear them. "Clara, he's— God, how do I explain this? He's not a good person. Like, seriously not good. Dangerous not good." "What do you mean, dangerous?" Meredith lowered her voice even further. "My fiancé's family does business with a lot of different people. Some of them are connected." Adrian Volkov is about as connected as they come. He runs half the organized crime in this city. People are terrified of him. Clara felt cold. Organized crime, you mean like mafia, gangs, whatever you want to call it? Drugs, weapons, gambling, probably worse things I don't even know about. He's incredibly powerful and incredibly dangerous, and the only reason he's at this party is because refusing his presence would have been even more dangerous. Stay away from him, Clara. Please. Clara nodded numbly, but she couldn't help glancing back toward the windows. Adrian was still standing there, still watching her, his expression unreadable across the distance. She looked away quickly. The rest of the party passed in a blur. Clara tried to enjoy herself, tried to focus on Meredith's happiness and the celebration, but she felt Adrian's presence like a weight against her skin. Every time she moved through the room, she was hyper-aware of where he was, careful to maintain distance, to not accidentally walk past him again. By 11 o'clock, she'd had enough. She found Meredith, made her excuses, and called for a car using the rideshare app on her phone. The elevator ride down felt like escape. The cool night air outside the building felt like freedom. The black town car that pulled up exactly 3 minutes later felt like salvation. Clara slid into the back seat with relief, rattling off her address to the driver. The partition between front and back was up, tinted dark enough that she could only see the silhouette of the driver's head. The car pulled smoothly into traffic. Clara let her head fall back against the leather seat, closing her eyes. The champagne had given her a mild headache, and the heels Meredith had insisted she wear were murdering her feet. All she wanted was her apartment, her pajamas, and about 12 hours of unconsciousness. It took her almost 5 minutes to realize they were going the wrong direction. Clara opened her eyes and looked out the window, frowning. They should have been heading north toward her neighborhood. Instead, they were moving east toward the waterfront. "Excuse me," she called toward the partition. "I think you made a wrong turn. I'm going to—" The partition slid down. Adrian Volkov looked at her through the rearview mirror. "No wrong turn," he said calmly. "We're going exactly where we need to go." The world tilted sideways. Clara lunged for the door handle, but the locks were engaged, the child safety features activated. She was trapped. "Let me out," she said, hating how her voice shook. "Let me out right now or I'll call the police." "No, you won't." Adrian's eyes never left the road. His hands were steady on the wheel, completely relaxed. "Put your phone away, Clara. We need to talk, and I'd prefer to do it somewhere private." "I don't want to talk to you. I want to go home." "That's not an option right now." Terror crystallized into something sharper. Anger. "This is kidnapping. You're kidnapping me. I'm protecting you." He said it like it was obvious, like she was being unreasonable for objecting. "There's a difference." "Protecting me from what?" "From the consequences of being seen at that party." Adrian took a turn too fast, and Clara grabbed the door handle for stability. "You were photographed, Clara, multiple times, standing near members of one of the most powerful crime families on the East Coast. Looking like—" He paused, glancing at her again in the mirror. "Looking like you belong there." "I don't belong there. I don't belong anywhere near any of this." "I know that, you know that. But my enemies don't know that." The car accelerated, moving through dark streets that were becoming increasingly unfamiliar. And in my world, perception is more dangerous than reality. Clara's mind was racing, trying to find an angle, a way out. "What enemies?" "The kind who would use you to get to me if they thought you mattered to me." "I don't matter to you. We just met." Adrian's eyes met hers in the mirror, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "That's the problem," he said quietly. "You should matter to me even less than you do." The car pulled through a gate that Clara hadn't seen open, then up a long driveway toward a massive stone house that looked like it had been transported from some European estate. Security lights blazed on as they approached. The car stopped in front of broad steps leading to a heavy wooden door. Adrian got out, circled the car, and opened Clara's door. "Come inside, Saud," he said, extending his hand. "I'll explain everything." Clara didn't move. "And if I refuse?" "Then I'll carry you. But I'd prefer not to. I'm trying very hard to be civilized about this." "Civilized?" Clara laughed, and it came out slightly hysterical. "You kidnapped me." "I saved your life," Adrian corrected. His hand remained extended, patient. "You just don't know it yet." Clara looked at his hand, then at his face, then at the dark driveway behind them and the high walls surrounding the property. She could scream, but there was no one to hear her. She could fight, but she'd lose. She could refuse, but he'd already told her exactly what would happen. She was out of options. Clara took his hand and let him pull her from the car. His grip was firm, warm, and somehow gentle despite everything. He led her up the steps and through the front door into an entrance hall that belonged in a museum. Marble floors, crystal chandelier, artwork that was probably worth more than Clara would earn in her lifetime. "This way," Adrian said, guiding her into a sitting room dominated by a fireplace and furnished with leather chairs that looked both expensive and comfortable. Clara remained standing, wrapping her arms around herself. The crimson dress that had felt like armor at the party now felt like a liability. She was too exposed, too visible. Adrian moved to a bar cart and poured 2 glasses of whiskey. He offered one to Clara. "I don't want it," she said. "Drink it anyway. You're going to need it." Clara took the glass but didn't drink. "Explain. Now. Why am I here?" Adrian settled into one of the leather chairs, perfectly at ease. 3 weeks ago, a shipment belonging to the Zakharov syndicate was intercepted at the port. $40 million worth of products seized. They believe I was responsible. "Were you?" "Yes." He said it without hesitation, without shame. "Viktor Zakharov has been encroaching on territory that belongs to me. I sent a message. He responded by declaring war." Clara's fingers tightened around the glass. "What does this have to do with me?" "War has rules, Clara, even in my world. You don't target civilians, you don't involve innocents. But those rules only apply if your enemy believes someone is genuinely innocent." Adrian leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes locked on hers. "The moment you were photographed at that party, standing near members of my organization, wearing a dress the color of a declaration, you stopped being innocent in their eyes. That's insane. That's reality. Victor's people will have already run your face through facial recognition. By tomorrow morning, they'll know your name, your address, where you work, who your friends are, and every routine you follow. They'll know you're nobody. But they'll also know you were at that party, and that's enough." The glass slipped from Clara's hand, shattering against the floor. Whiskey spread across marble in a dark stain. Adrian didn't move. "You were already a target before I spoke to you," he said quietly. "When I approached you, when I touched you, when I looked at you the way I did, I made it worse. I marked you, so now I have to protect you." "You don't have to do anything," Clara said, her voice rising. "You can just let me go. I'll be careful. I'll stay home. You'll die." The words were flat, factual. "Probably within a week. They'll make it look like an accident, or they won't bother. Either way, you'll be dead, and it will be my fault." Clara felt the walls closing in. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't her life. "How long?" she whispered. "How long what? How long do I have to stay here?" Adrian stood, moving to a window that overlooked dark grounds. "Until the war is over," he said. "Until Victor is dead, or I am, or we reach some kind of accord. However long that takes." "That could be months." "Yes. I have a job. I have a life." "You'll call in sick. I'll arrange for you to take a leave of absence if necessary. Your bills will be paid. Your life will be waiting for you when this is over." Clara wanted to scream, wanted to cry, wanted to wake up from whatever nightmare this was. Instead, she heard herself ask, "And if I try to leave?" Adrian turned to look at her, and his expression was almost gentle. "Then you'll be found. And I don't know if I'll find you first or Victor will." He crossed the room until he was standing directly in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "I know you're frightened. I know this isn't fair. But I'm very good at keeping people alive, Clara. Trust me to do that." "I don't trust you at all." "That's smart." His lips curved into that almost smile again. "But you're going to have to anyway." A woman appeared in the doorway, older, stern-faced, wearing a housekeeper's uniform. "Anna will show you to your room," Adrian said. "You'll have everything you need. If you want something that isn't provided, tell Anna and she'll arrange it. Don't try to leave the house. Don't try to contact anyone outside without clearing it with me first." "So I'm a prisoner." "You're a guest under protective custody." Adrian moved toward the door, then paused. "I know the distinction feels semantic right now, But there is a difference, Clara, and eventually you'll understand it. He left without waiting for a response. Anna gestured toward the hallway. This way, miss. Clara followed because there was nothing else to do. They climbed a broad staircase to the second floor, then down a corridor lined with closed doors. Anna stopped at the last room and pushed open the door. The bedroom was larger than Claire's entire apartment. A four-poster bed dominated the space, covered in white linens that probably had a thread count in the thousands. French doors opened onto a balcony. A sitting area included a small sofa and a television. An attached bathroom was visible through another doorway. Mr. Volkov had clothes brought in for you, Anna said, opening a closet to reveal an array of outfits in Clara's size. If anything doesn't fit or you need something else, let me know. Breakfast is at 8, but I can bring something to your room if you prefer. Do you have any questions? Clara had 1,000 questions, but none that Anna could answer. No, she said quietly. Get some rest, miss. Things always look different in the morning. Anna left, closing the door behind her. Clara stood in the center of the enormous room, still wearing the crimson dress, and felt the full weight of her situation settle over her shoulders. She was trapped in the home of one of the most dangerous men in the city. She was a target in a war she didn't understand, and no one even knew she was missing. Clara moved to the French doors and stepped out onto the balcony. The grounds below were dark except for security lights along the perimeter. High walls, cameras, guards probably. Escape would be impossible. She looked up at the sky, searching for stars, but the city's light pollution washed them out. Even the heavens were obscured. Clara went back inside, closed the doors, and finally let herself cry. The girl no one noticed had finally been seen, and it might be the thing that killed her. Far below, in his study, Adrian Volkov poured himself another glass of whiskey and stared at the security feed showing Clara's room. She was on the balcony, small and alone, wrapped in a dress the color of blood. He should feel nothing. She was a complication, a liability he'd created for himself. Protection duty was a professional obligation, nothing more. But when she'd walked past him at that party, something had shifted. Some recognition he couldn't name and didn't want to examine too closely. Adrian had built his empire on careful control, calculated risks, and absolute emotional detachment. He'd learned early that caring about people made you weak, made you vulnerable, made you human in a world that punished humanity without mercy. He'd broken that rule tonight. And as he watched Clara return inside and finally let herself break down, Adrian Volkov made a decision that would change everything. He would keep her alive, even if it cost him everything he'd built, even if it cost him his life. The war with Viktor Zakharov had just become personal. Clara woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the disorienting sensation of not knowing where she was. For 3 perfect seconds, she thought the previous night had been a nightmare. Then she saw the crimson dress draped over a chair, and reality crashed back with brutal clarity. She was a prisoner in a crime lord's mansion. The bedside clock read 9:30. She'd slept through breakfast, though she doubted she could have eaten anything anyway. Her stomach was twisted into neat knots. Her head ached from crying, and every muscle felt like she'd been hit by a truck. A soft knock at the door made her pull the covers up to her chin. "Miss Bennett?" Anna's voice came through the wood. "I have coffee and pastries if you're awake." Clara almost said no, but her throat was raw with thirst. "Come in." Anna entered carrying a tray that could have fed 4 people. Coffee in a silver pot, fresh orange juice, croissants, fruit, yogurt, and what looked like eggs Benedict. She set it on the small table by the sitting area. "Mr. Volkov asked me to inform you that he'll be working from home today," Anna said, her tone professionally neutral. "He'd like to speak with you this afternoon if you're feeling up to it." "And if I'm not feeling up to it?" Anna's expression didn't change. "Then he'll speak with you tomorrow." "He's not a monster, miss, whatever you might think." "He kidnapped me. He saved your life." Anna moved to the closet, pulling out clothes with practiced efficiency. "There's a difference, though I understand it might not feel that way yet. These should fit. There's a gym on the 3rd floor if you want to exercise, a library on the 1st floor, and the gardens are accessible through the conservatory. You're free to move about the house and grounds." Clara sat up straighter. "I can leave my room?" "Of course. You're not locked in, Miss Bennett. You're protected." Anna laid out a pair of dark jeans and a soft cashmere sweater. Mr. Volkov has meetings until 3. If you need anything, press the button by the bed and someone will come. Try to eat something. It'll help. She left before Clara could formulate a response. Clara stared at the tray of food, her stomach churning. But Anna was right. She needed to eat, needed to keep her strength up. She forced down half a croissant and some fruit, drank 2 cups of coffee, then showered in the enormous bathroom with its marble surfaces and rainfall showerhead. The clothes fit perfectly, which was somehow more unsettling than if they hadn't. Someone had gone to significant trouble to ensure her comfort. It made the cage feel more gilded, but no less confining. By 11, Clara was restless enough to explore. She opened her bedroom door cautiously, half expecting guards, but the hallway was empty. She made her way downstairs, following the sound of voices to what turned out to be the kitchen. A man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair was arguing with a younger woman about vegetables. "I'm telling you, the carrots are too soft," the woman was saying in accented English. "You know Mr. Volkov doesn't like them overcooked." "Then you cook them," the man shot back. "I have 12 things happening on this stove," and he stopped when he noticed Clara in the doorway. "Oh, you must be Miss Bennett." Clara felt her face flush. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to intrude." "No intrusion." The man wiped his hands on his apron. "I'm Marcus, head chef. This is Irina, who thinks she knows better than someone who trained in Paris." "I trained in Moscow," Irina countered, "which is why I know carrots should have texture." Clara couldn't help it. She smiled. The normalcy of their bickering was absurdly comforting. "Are you hungry?" Marcus asked. "Anna said you didn't eat much breakfast." "I'm fine, thank you." "That's not what I asked." Marcus was already moving, pulling things from the refrigerator. "You're too thin. Sit. I'll make you lunch." "Really, I don't need—" "Sit." It was said kindly but firmly, in a tone that suggested arguing would be futile. Clara sat at the kitchen island and watched Marcus work with the fluid efficiency of someone who'd spent decades perfecting his craft. Within minutes, a sandwich materialized in front of her. Fresh mozzarella, tomatoes, basil, and some kind of spread she couldn't identify on bread that was clearly homemade. "Eat," Marcus commanded. Clara took a bite and nearly moaned. It was possibly the best sandwich she'd ever tasted. "See?" Marcus looked satisfied. "Always listen to the chef." "Marcus has an ego the size of this house," Irina said, but she was smiling. "But he's not wrong about the food." Clara ate slowly, listening to Marcus and Irina fall back into their comfortable argument. It was strange being in this place that was equal parts fortress and home, surrounded by people who worked for a man who'd abducted her, but treated her like a guest. "Can I ask you something?" Clara said when she'd finished the sandwich. Marcus and Irina exchanged glances. "You can ask," Marcus said carefully. "Can't promise we'll answer." "How long have you worked for him? For Adrian?" 12 years, Marcus said. "Since he bought this house." 7 for me, Irina added. "And he's— what's he like? As an employer?" Another exchanged glance. "Fair," Marcus said finally. "Demanding, but fair. Pays well. Treats the staff with respect, which is rarer than you'd think in this world." "He's also terrifying when he wants to be," Irina added bluntly, "but he's never terrifying without reason. If Mr. Volkov says you're under his protection, you're safer here than anywhere else in the world." Clara wanted to argue, but something in Irina's eyes made her reconsider. There was absolute conviction there, earned through years of experience. "Thank you," Clara said quietly. "For the sandwich, for being kind." "Kindness costs nothing," Marcus said. "And you look like you could use some." Clara spent the afternoon in the library, a 2-story room with floor-to-ceiling shelves and a rolling ladder that looked like something from a movie. She tried to read but couldn't focus, her mind spinning through impossible scenarios and increasingly desperate escape plans. At precisely 3 o'clock, Anna appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Volkov will see you now, miss." Clara's pulse jumped. "Where?" "His study. Follow me." They walked through corridors Clara was already starting to recognize, stopping at a heavy wooden door. Anna knocked once, then opened it without waiting for a response. Adrian's study was exactly what Clara would have expected. Dark wood, leather furniture, shelves lined with books that looked read rather than decorative. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the grounds. Adrian sat behind a massive desk, reading something on a tablet. He looked up when Clara entered, and she was struck again by the intensity of his gaze. "Thank you, Anna," he said. "Close the door." Anna withdrew, leaving Clara alone with him. "Sit," Adrian said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. Clara remained standing. "I'd rather stand." "Suit yourself." He set the tablet aside and leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You look better. Did you sleep?" "Eventually." "And the room? Everything you need?" "The room is fine. The whole house is fine. It's a beautiful prison." Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. "I understand you're angry." "Do you?" Clara felt her temper rising. "Do you really? Because you kidnapped me, told me my life is in danger, and now I'm trapped here while you wage some kind of war I don't understand and didn't ask to be part of." "You're right." The admission surprised her. "You didn't ask for any of this. But that doesn't change the reality of your situation." "Then change my situation." "Let me go. I'll disappear. I'll leave the city, change my name. They'd find you." Adrian stood, moving to the windows. "Viktor Zakharov has resources you can't imagine. Contacts in law enforcement, facial recognition software, people in every major city on the East Coast. You'd last maybe a month before someone recognized you from the photos." "You don't know that." "I do know that." He turned to face her. "This is what I do, Clara. I know how these people think because I am one of these people. And I'm telling you that running would be suicide." Clara wrapped her arms around herself. "So what am I supposed to do? Just stay here forever?" "Not forever, just until it's safe." "When will that be?" "I don't know yet." Adrian crossed to the desk, pulling out a folder. "But I'm working on it. In the meantime, I need you to understand something." He opened the folder and spread out several photographs. Clara stepped closer despite herself. The photos showed the party from the night before, taken from various angles. And there she was, over and over, talking to Meredith, standing near the windows, walking through the crowd. In several shots, Adrian was visible in the background or approaching her. "These were taken by Victor's surveillance team," Adrian said. "They're watching everyone connected to my organization. The moment you appeared at that party, you became a person of interest." Clara picked up one of the photos. In it, she was mid-laugh at something Meredith had said, completely unaware she was being watched. The violation of it made her skin crawl. "How did you get these?" "I have my own people in Victor's organization. They're feeding me information, but it works both ways. He probably knows you're here by now." Clara set the photo down with shaking hands. "So this is real, all of it?" "Yes." "And I'm really in danger?" "Yes." Adrian's voice softened slightly. "I know it's hard to accept, but I need you to understand that I'm not the enemy here, Clara. I'm the only thing standing between you and people who would use you as leverage against me." Clara sank into the chair she'd refused earlier, her legs suddenly unsteady. "This is insane. My life was normal 3 days ago. I was nobody. I am nobody." "You were nobody," Adrian corrected. "The moment I looked at you, that changed." Something in his tone made her glance up sharply. There was an intensity in his expression that had nothing to do with protective duty. "Why?" Clara asked. "Why did you approach me at all? If you knew it would put me in danger, why didn't you just ignore me?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment. "I should have," he said finally. "It would have been smarter, safer for both of us." "But you didn't." "No, I didn't." He met her eyes. "I don't have a good explanation for that. Sometimes we make choices that defy logic." The air between them felt suddenly charged, heavy with things unsaid. Clara looked away first. "How long have you been doing this?" she asked. "This criminal empire thing?" "Since I was 16. Adrian returned to his chair. "My father ran the organization before me. I inherited it when he died." "You didn't have a choice?" "Everyone has choices, Clara. I made mine." "Do you regret it?" The question seemed to surprise him. "Some days. Not often enough, probably." He paused. "Why do you ask?" "Because you don't seem like a monster. And I'm trying to understand how someone who's not a monster ends up doing monstrous things." Adrian's laugh was bitter. "That's the mistake people make. Thinking monsters look different than everyone else. The truth is, we all make compromises. Draw lines we swear we'll never cross, then cross them anyway. The only difference is how far we're willing to go. Where's your line? He looked at her for a long moment. I don't hurt innocents, he said finally. I don't traffic in people. I don't target families. Beyond that, he shrugged, the lines get blurry. You kill people. Yes. The blunt admission should have horrified her, but Clara found herself asking, does it bother you? Killing people who are trying to kill me or mine? No. Adrian leaned forward. Does that make me a monster in your eyes? I don't know yet, Clara said honestly. Ask me again when I've had more time to think about it. Something that might have been respect flickered across Adrian's face. Fair enough. A knock at the door interrupted them. A man entered without waiting for permission. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar running down his left cheek. We have a problem, he said, then stopped when he noticed Clara. Sorry, didn't know you had company. This is Dimitri, Adrian said to Clara. My head of security. Dimitri, this is Clara Bennett. You can speak freely in front of her. Dimitri's eyebrows rose, but he didn't comment. Victor's people hit one of our warehouses an hour ago. 4 dead, 3 wounded. They took everything. Adrian's expression went cold, all traces of the man who'd been almost human moments ago disappearing behind a mask of ice. Which warehouse? The one on 5th Street. The product alone was worth $2 million. Leave us, Adrian said to Clara, his attention already shifting entirely to Dimitri. Anna will take you back to your room. Clara stood, but paused at the door. The 4 people who died. Did they have families? Adrian looked at her sharply. Why? Because I want to know if this war you're fighting has actual casualties or if it's just property damage. 3 had families, Dimitri answered when Adrian didn't. Wives, kids. We'll take care of them. Clara nodded and left, her mind reeling. 4 people dead. Because of a war between crime organizations. Because of money and territory and pride. And she was caught in the middle of it. Anna was waiting in the hallway, as if she'd known Clara would need an escort. They walked in silence back to Clara's room. Will it always be like this? Clara asked when they reached her door. People dying? Anna's expression was carefully neutral. War is always bloody, miss. The only question is how long it lasts and how many people it costs. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She paced her room, tried to read, attempted to watch television, but nothing could quiet her racing thoughts. Around midnight, she gave up and ventured into the hallway. The house was quiet, but not silent. She could hear muffled voices from somewhere below, footsteps on another floor. She wandered down the stairs, drawn by instinct more than intention, and found herself outside Adrian's study. The door was cracked open, lamplight spilling into the hallway. Through the gap, she could see Adrian at his desk, still working. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, and there was a weariness in his posture that hadn't been there earlier. Clara knew she should go back to her room, but instead she knocked softly. Come in, Adrian said without looking up. She pushed the door open. I can't sleep. Adrian glanced up, and something in his expression shifted when he saw her. Neither can I, apparently. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Want company in our insomnia? Clara sat, pulling her knees up to her chest. She was wearing pajamas Anna had provided. Soft cotton pants and a matching top that were far nicer than anything she'd owned before. I keep thinking about those 4 people who died, she said, and their families. Don't. Adrian's voice was firm. This isn't your burden to carry. Isn't it? I'm part of this now. You said so yourself. You're a victim of circumstances, Clara, not a participant. There's a difference? Adrian set down his pen. Yes, a significant one. He poured himself a glass of whiskey from the decanter on his desk. Want one? I don't really drink. Neither did I before I took over this organization. He poured a second glass anyway and slid it across the desk. It helps sometimes, dulls the sharp edges. Clara took the glass but didn't drink immediately. Do you think about them? The people who die because of this? Every single one, Adrian said quietly. I might be a lot of things, Clara, but I'm not numb. Every death weighs on me. Every family destroyed. Every consequence of my choices. Then why keep doing it? Because stopping would mean losing everything I've built. And everything I've built keeps thousands of people employed, fed, protected. My organization isn't just crime, Clara. It's infrastructure. Take it away, and you create a power vacuum that would destroy this city. That's a convenient rationalization. Maybe, but it's also true. Adrian took a long drink. I'm not asking you to understand it. Hell, I'm not even asking you to forgive it. I'm just explaining the reality I live in. Clara finally sipped the whiskey and immediately coughed. It burned all the way down. Adrian's lips curved slightly. First time? I told you I don't drink. You'll build up a tolerance if you stay here long enough. The casual mention of her extended captivity should have angered her, but Clara found she was too tired for anger. Tell me about him, she said instead. Viktor Zakharov, the man who wants to kill me to hurt you. Adrian's expression darkened. Viktor is old-school Russian mob. He came to this country 15 years ago with nothing and built an empire through brutality and fear. He's smart, ruthless, and completely without conscience. Sounds familiar. I'm nothing like him. There was genuine offense in Adrian's tone. I have lines I won't cross. Viktor has none. What does he want? Everything I have. My territory, my resources, my reputation. Adrian leaned back in his chair. We've been circling each other for years, but it escalated 3 months ago when he started pushing into neighborhoods under my protection. I pushed back. He retaliated. It's been escalating ever since. The shipment you intercepted was the latest in a series of exchanges. Viktor's been smuggling weapons along with his usual product, high-grade military hardware. I couldn't let that stand. Clara processed this. So you started a war over weapons. I started a war over weapons that could be used to kill hundreds of people. There's a difference. Is there? Adrian's eyes met hers. You think I'm the villain in this story? I think you're both villains, Clara said, just with different justifications. You're probably right. Adrian finished his whiskey. But I'm the villain trying to keep you alive, which has to count for something. It does, Clara admitted. I just wish I understood why. Why what? Why you care? Why you're going to all this trouble for someone you don't even know? Adrian was quiet for so long that Clara thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. When you walked past me at that party, something shifted. I can't explain it better than that. You looked at me like I was just a man, not a monster or a king or a weapon, just a man. And for about 3 seconds I believed it. Clara's breath caught. Adrian, I know it's not rational. I know it's dangerous for both of us. But when I saw those surveillance photos, when I realized what it meant for you, he shook his head. I couldn't let it happen. Whatever this is between us, whatever it becomes or doesn't become, I couldn't let you die because I was too selfish to walk away. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest. I should go back to my room, Clara whispered. Probably. Neither of them moved. This is a terrible idea, Clara said. The worst, Adrian agreed. You're a criminal. A very successful one. You've killed people. More than I can count. I should hate you. You probably should. Clara stood and Adrian rose with her. They were close enough now that she could see the flecks of darker gray in his eyes, could smell his cologne mixed with whiskey. I don't hate you, she said quietly. I don't know what I feel, but it's not that. Adrian's hand lifted as if to touch her face, then stopped halfway. Clara, if I touch you right now, it changes everything. You understand that? I know. Once that line is crossed, I can't uncross it. I won't be able to think of you as just someone under my protection. You'll become something more, something dangerous. More dangerous than being a target in a mob war? Infinitely. His hand was still suspended between them, trembling slightly with restraint. Because at least with Viktor, I know the rules. This is uncharted territory. Clara should have stepped back, should have returned to her room, maintained the distance that would keep things simple. Instead, she closed the gap between them and pressed her palm against his. Adrian's fingers curled around hers, his grip strong but careful, like he was holding something precious that might shatter. You're making this very difficult, he said, his voice rough. Good, Clara whispered. You kidnapped me. You deserve some difficulty. And then, because the night had already gone strange and dangerous and completely off the rails, Clara rose on her toes and kissed him. For a heartbeat, Adrian was completely still, shocked into immobility. Then his free hand came up to cup the back of her head, and he kissed her back with an intensity that stole her breath. It wasn't gentle. It was fierce and demanding and edged with desperation, like they were both drowning and this was their only source of air. Adrian's fingers tangled in her hair, and Clara's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "This is insane," he muttered. "Completely," Clara agreed. "We barely know each other. I know you're dangerous and damaged and probably terrible for me. That's the most accurate assessment anyone's ever made. I also know that when you look at me, I feel seen, really seen, for the first time in my life." Adrian pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "Clara, I need you to understand something. If this continues, if we do this, I become even more of a liability to you. Victor will use it. My enemies will use it. You'll never be safe. I'm already not safe. It will get worse." "Maybe." Claire's hands were still fisted in his shirt, keeping him close. "But maybe it'll also be worth it." Adrian's laugh was shaky. "You have terrible survival instincts." "Apparently." He kissed her again, softer this time, but no less intense. When he finally stepped back, putting deliberate distance between them, his expression was conflicted. "Go to bed, Clara," he said quietly. "Before I forget every reason this is a bad idea." Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. She made it to the door before turning back. "Adrian?" "Yes?" "I'm still angry about being kidnapped." His smile was genuine this time, reaching his eyes. "Duly noted." Clara returned to her room in a daze, her lips still tingling, her heart racing. She climbed into bed and stared at the ceiling, trying to process what had just happened. She'd kissed a crime lord, and she wanted to do it again. Somewhere in the house below, Adrian Volkov sat in his study and made a series of phone calls that would reshape the landscape of the ongoing war. If Victor wanted blood, Adrian would give him blood. If he wanted to escalate, they'd escalate. But Clara Bennett was off limits. That was the new line in the sand. And anyone who crossed it would learn exactly how dangerous Adrian Volkov could be when he had something worth protecting. The next morning arrived with the kind of awkwardness that only comes from kissing someone you're supposed to fear and then retreating to separate corners like teenagers who've violated curfew. Clara heard Adrian leave the house early, his voice carrying up through the floors as he gave instructions to Dmitri. She stayed in her room until she was certain he was gone, then ventured downstairs to find Marcus already cooking breakfast. "You look tired," he observed, sliding a plate of eggs and toast in front of her. "Trouble sleeping?" "Something like that," Clara muttered, wondering if her face betrayed exactly what kind of trouble she'd gotten into the night before. If Marcus suspected anything, he was tactful enough not to mention it. He simply poured her coffee and returned to his cooking, humming something that sounded vaguely Russian. Clara spent the morning in the library again, this time actually managing to read. She'd found a worn copy of Anna Karenina tucked between newer volumes and lost herself in Tolstoy's world, grateful for the distraction from her own increasingly complicated reality. Around noon, Anna appeared with news that made Clara's stomach drop. "Mr. Volkov called. He'll be bringing guests for dinner tonight and would like you to join them." Clara looked up from her book. "Guests? What kind of guests?" "Business associates." Anna's tone suggested that was all the information Clara would be getting. "He asked that you wear something appropriate. I've laid out options in your room." "Anna, I don't think—" 7 o'clock in the formal dining room, Anna said, already retreating. "Please don't be late, miss. Mr. Volkov dislikes unpunctuality." Clara returned to her room to find 3 dresses hanging in the closet, each more intimidating than the last. She chose the simplest option, a navy dress with long sleeves and a modest neckline that made her feel slightly less exposed than the alternatives. By 6:30, she was pacing her room, anxiety building with each passing minute. What was Adrian thinking, parading her in front of his associates? Was this some kind of test? A statement? Or was he simply keeping her close because after last night, distance felt impossible? At precisely 7 o'clock, Clara forced herself downstairs. Voices carried from the dining room. Male, speaking in a mixture of English and what sounded like Russian. She paused outside the door, gathering courage. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. "It's just dinner." She pushed open the door. The dining room was stunning. A long table set with crystal and china, candles casting warm light over everything. 6 men sat around the table, and every single one of them turned to look at her when she entered. Adrian rose from his seat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. "Gentlemen," he said smoothly, "this is Clara Bennett. Clara, these are business associates of mine. Please, sit." He gestured to the empty chair on his right, a position of significance that wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Clara felt the weight of multiple gazes as she crossed to the chair and sat down. A man directly across from her, older with steel gray hair and cold eyes, studied her with undisguised interest. "This is the one causing all the trouble?" he asked in accented English. "Victor is causing the trouble," Adrian corrected, his tone pleasant but edged with warning. "Clara is simply caught in the crossfire." "Interesting choice of words." The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I am Sergei Volkov, Adrian's uncle." Clara's surprise must have shown because Sergei laughed. "He didn't tell you he had family? My nephew likes to keep his cards close." Sergei leaned back in his chair. "Tell me, Miss Bennett, how are you finding your accommodations?" "Luxurious," Clara said carefully, "for a prison." The table went silent. Adrian's jaw tightened, but Sergei laughed again, this time with genuine amusement. "She has spirit. I like that." He raised his glass toward Adrian. "Much better than the last one." "There was no last one," Adrian said coldly. "And Clara is under my protection, Uncle. I expect everyone at this table to remember that." The message was clear, and the men around the table nodded their understanding. Dmitri, seated near the far end, caught Clara's eye and gave her an almost imperceptible nod of approval. Dinner was served, course after course of Marcus's exquisite cooking. The conversation flowed in multiple languages, sometimes including Clara, often not. She picked up enough to understand they were discussing territory, shipments, and something about a warehouse fire that might have been accidental, but probably wasn't. "The question," said a younger man with a scar across his knuckles, "is whether we escalate or negotiate." "There's no negotiating with Victor," Dmitri said flatly. "He wants everything or nothing." "Then we give him nothing," Sergei declared. "We hit him where it hurts, his operations at the port, his clubs downtown. Make him bleed until he comes begging for terms." "That's a dangerous game," another man warned. "Victor has connections we don't fully understand yet. Foreign backers, possibly governmental protection." Adrian had been quiet through most of this exchange, but now he leaned forward. "We don't escalate blindly," he said, his voice cutting through the debate. "We respond strategically. Victor's strength is his unpredictability. Our strength is precision. We choose our targets carefully and make each strike count." "And what about her?" Sergei jerked his chin toward Clara. "Victor knows she's here. He'll use that knowledge." "Let him try." The menace in Adrian's tone made Clara's skin prickle. "Anyone who touches Clara answers to me personally." The promise hung in the air, heavy with implied violence. Clara set down her fork, her appetite gone. These men were discussing war like it was a business transaction, weighing lives against profits with casual indifference. And she was sitting among them, marked as Adrian's weakness, a vulnerability that could be exploited. "Excuse me," she said quietly, pushing back from the table. "I need some air." Adrian started to rise, but she shook her head. "Please, just give me a moment." She left before he could protest, escaping through the conservatory to the gardens beyond. The night air was cool against her flushed skin. She walked until she found a stone bench near a fountain, then sat down and tried to steady her breathing. What was she doing? Playing house with a crime lord, pretending this was anything resembling normal? People were dying, war was escalating, and she was eating 5-star meals and wearing designer dresses like none of it mattered. "I thought I might find you here." Clara looked up to find Dmitri approaching, his hands in his pockets. "Did Adrian send you to check on me?" she asked. "No, he's still dealing with his uncle." Dmitri sat on the opposite end of the bench. "Sergei can be, intense. That's one word for it. He's also right, about you being a target." Dmitri's expression was serious. "Victor will come for you eventually. It's not a question of if, but when." Clara wrapped her arms around herself. "That's supposed to make me feel better?" "No. It's supposed to make you understand what you're up against." Dmitri paused. I've worked for Adrian for 8 years. I've seen him make a lot of decisions, some good, some questionable, but I've never seen him like this, the way he is with you. And how is he with me? Protective to the point of irrational, distracted, human. Dimitri met her eyes. That last one is the most dangerous. Adrian survived this long by being calculated and detached. You're making him neither of those things. I didn't ask for any of this. I know, but it doesn't change the reality. Dimitri stood. Be careful, Clara. Not just with the external threats. Be careful with him, too. Because when this is over, one way or another, you're both going to have to live with the choices you're making now. He left her alone with those words echoing in her head. Clara sat in the garden for another 20 minutes before forcing herself to return inside. The dining room was empty now, dishes cleared, guests presumably departed or moved to another room. She found Adrian in his study, standing by the window with a glass of whiskey. "I'm sorry," she said from the doorway, "for leaving dinner like that." Adrian turned to face her. "Don't apologize. I shouldn't have asked you to sit through that. It was unfair. Your uncle is terrifying." "Yes, he is. But he's also loyal, and right now I need loyalty more than I need warmth." Adrian set down his glass. "Did Dimitri find you?" "How did you know?" "Because I know Dimitri. He has this annoying habit of giving people perspective whether they want it or not." Adrian crossed to her, stopping just short of touching distance. "What did he tell you?" "That I'm making you human. That it's dangerous." "He's not wrong." "Adrian, I can't be responsible for—" "You're not responsible for anything," Adrian interrupted. "I made my choices, Clara. Every single one of them. You didn't force me to approach you at that party. You didn't force me to bring you here. You didn't force me to—" He stopped himself. "To what?" "To care." The admission seemed to cost him. "I've spent 15 years building walls, Clara, keeping everyone at a distance. It's safer that way, cleaner. And then you walked past me in that damn red dress, and every wall I'd built started to crack." Clara's heart was pounding. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? "I don't know yet." Adrian finally closed the distance between them, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. "All I know is that I can't seem to stay away from you, even though every rational part of my brain is screaming that I should." "So stop being rational," Clara whispered. "That's not how I survive." "Maybe surviving isn't enough anymore." Adrian's thumb traced her cheekbone, his touch achingly gentle. "You're going to destroy me. Or save you. I'm not sure I can be saved. Let me try anyway." This time when they kissed, it was slower, deeper, weighted with everything they couldn't say aloud. Adrian's arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her close, and Clara let herself sink into the dangerous comfort of his embrace. They were interrupted by a sharp knock on the door. Adrian pulled back with obvious reluctance. "Come in." Dimitri entered, his expression grim. "We have a situation. Victor's people just hit the club on Madison. 3 of our guys are dead, and they left a message." "What kind of message?" "The kind written in blood." Dimitri's eyes flicked to Clara, then back to Adrian. "They know she's here. They know what she means to you, and they're coming for her." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Adrian's entire demeanor shifted, the man who'd been holding Clara moments ago disappearing behind the mask of a crime lord preparing for war. "Double the security detail," he ordered. "No one gets within a mile of this property without being vetted. And I want eyes on every known Victor associate in the city. If they so much as sneeze in our direction, I want to know about it." "Already done," Dimitri said. "But boss, we need to talk about contingencies. If they breach the estate, they won't. But if they do, they won't." Adrian's voice was absolute. "Because I will burn this entire city to the ground before I let them touch her." Dimitri held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "Understood. I'll coordinate with the security team." After he left, silence settled over the room like ash. "This is because of me," Clara said quietly. "Those 3 people died because Victor knows about me. Those 3 people died because Victor is a monster who uses violence as a negotiating tactic," Adrian corrected sharply. "Don't take ownership of his choices." But Dimitri said, "Dimitri is right that you're a factor. But you're not the cause, Clara. This war started long before you walked into that party." Adrian pulled her back into his arms, as if proximity could protect her from the truth. Victor would have found some excuse to escalate. You just happened to be convenient. Clara pressed her face against his chest, listening to the steady thud of his heartbeat. I'm scared. Good. Fear keeps you alert. His hand stroked her hair. But I need you to trust me too. Can you do that? I don't know. Can I? Adrian was quiet for a moment. I've done terrible things, Clara. Things that would make you sick if you knew the details. I've hurt people, killed people, destroyed lives in service of building my empire. I'm not a good man. I know that. But I swear to you, on everything I have and everything I am, that I will keep you alive. No matter what it costs me, no matter who I have to destroy. You will survive this. The fierce certainty in his voice should have comforted her. Instead, it terrified her, because she understood the implications. Adrian would wage total war to protect her, would sacrifice anything and anyone, would become the monster he claimed not to be. All for a woman he barely knew. Come on, Adrian said, releasing her reluctantly. I'm putting you in one of the secure rooms on the 3rd floor. Reinforced walls, separate security system, direct line to the panic room if something goes wrong. You really think they'll try to get inside? I think Victor is desperate, and desperate men do stupid things. Adrian took her hand, lacing their fingers together, but he's going to learn that some targets are too costly to pursue. The secure room turned out to be less prison-like than Clara had feared. It was smaller than her previous bedroom, but well-appointed, with a comfortable bed, a television, and a bathroom. The windows were bulletproof glass, and she noticed cameras in every corner. I know it's not ideal, Adrian said, watching her take in the space, but it's safer. The security team monitors these feeds 24/7, so I have no privacy. The bathroom camera is motion-activated and only records if there's an intrusion. Otherwise, it's turned off. He gestured to a red button by the bed. That's the panic button. Press it, and this entire room locks down while help is dispatched. Don't hesitate to use it if you hear or see anything suspicious. Clara nodded, feeling the weight of her situation settle over her shoulders once again. Will you stay, just for a little while? Adrian glanced at his watch, clearly torn between duty and desire. I have calls to make, people to coordinate with. Please. Clara hated how small her voice sounded. I know you have responsibilities. I don't want to be alone right now. The conflict on Adrian's face was almost painful to watch, but finally he nodded. 30 minutes, he said. Then I really do have to go. They sat together on the bed, Clara tucked against Adrian's side, his arm around her shoulders. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The silence was enough. The simple fact of not being alone in the growing darkness. When Adrian's phone buzzed for the 4th time, Clara reluctantly pulled away. Go, she said. I'll be okay. Adrian stood but paused at the door. Lock this behind me. Don't open it for anyone except me, Dmitri, or Anna. And if anyone else tries to get in... Panic button. I know. Clara managed a weak smile. Go save your empire, Adrian Volkov. I'm more interested in saving you. He kissed her once, hard and fast, then left before she could respond. Clara locked the door and leaned against it, listening to his footsteps recede down the hallway. Then she crossed to the bed and sat down, staring at the walls that were simultaneously protecting her and trapping her. Somewhere in the city, Viktor Zakharov was planning his next move, and Clara had become the piece on the chessboard that both players were fighting to control. The hours crawled past. Clara tried to sleep, but couldn't. Every sound in the house made her jump. Every shadow outside her window seemed menacing. Around 2 a.m, she heard raised voices from somewhere below, Adrian and someone else arguing in Russian. At 3:15, gunfire erupted in the distance. Clara was at the window before she realized she'd moved, peering out into the darkness. She could see nothing but the security lights illuminating the grounds, but the sound of weapons discharge was unmistakable. Her hand hovered over the panic button. Then silence fell, heavy and absolute. Minutes passed. 5, 10, 15. Clara's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number that made her blood run cold. 3 of his guards are dead. Tell Adrian that next time we're coming inside. And we're coming for you. Her hand shook as she grabbed the room's landline and dialed the number Adrian had made her memorize. He answered on the first ring. Clara, are you safe? Someone just texted me. They said 3 guards are dead and next time they're coming for me. Lock down. Now. Hit the panic button. But do it, Clara. Right now. She pressed the red button. Immediately, steel shutters slammed down over the windows. The door locks engaged with an audible click. Red emergency lighting activated, bathing the room in crimson. Claire's phone rang. Adrian. I'm coming to you, he said, and she could hear him moving, running. Stay exactly where you are. Don't open the door for anyone. Adrian, what's happening? Victor's people breached the outer perimeter. We stopped them, but they got closer than they should have. His breathing was labored. They knew exactly where to hit, which means someone on the inside gave them information. You have a traitor. Yes, and until I find out who, no one gets close to you except me. She heard a door slam. I'm in the stairwell, 2 minutes. Clara counted the seconds, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might bruise her ribs. She heard footsteps in the hallway outside, then Adrian's voice. Clara, it's me. I'm outside the door. You need to override the lockdown to let me in. She ran to the control panel by the door, pressing the sequence of buttons Adrian had shown her earlier. The locks disengaged with a heavy thunk. Adrian pushed inside immediately, and Clara's breath caught. His shirt was torn, blood splattered across his chest and face. Though whether it was his or someone else's, she couldn't tell. He had a gun in his right hand, and his eyes were wild with something between rage and fear. Are you hurt? She asked, reaching for him. It's not my blood. Adrian set the gun on the dresser, then pulled her into his arms with bruising force. You're okay. You're okay. 3 guards died, Clara whispered against his chest. Because of me. Because of Victor. Adrian's grip tightened. This ends tomorrow. I'm done playing defense. If he wants war, I'll give him war. And when the smoke clears, Viktor Zakharov will be nothing but a memory. The cold certainty in his voice sent chills down Clara's spine. This was the crime lord, the killer, the man who'd built an empire on violence and fear, and he was unleashing all of that fury to protect her. What are you going to do? Clara asked, though part of her didn't want to know the answer. Adrian pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. Whatever it takes. Everything it takes. His thumb brushed across her cheek. I need you to understand something, Clara. What happens next is going to be ugly. Brutal. There will be casualties on both sides, and when it's over, you're going to know exactly what kind of monster I can be. And if that changes how I feel about you, then at least you'll be alive to feel it. Adrian kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. Desperate touches that felt like goodbye. Stay in this room. Don't come out until I personally come to get you. Promise me. I promise. Good. He retrieved his gun, checked the magazine with practiced efficiency. At the door, he paused. For what it's worth, Clara Bennett, meeting you was the best and worst thing that's ever happened to me. Adrian, but he was already gone, the door locking automatically behind him. Clara stood in the center of the red-lit room and realized with terrible clarity that the war had just escalated beyond anything she'd imagined, and tomorrow the city would burn. The hours that followed felt like waiting for an execution. Clara sat on the edge of the bed in her crimson-lit prison, listening to the sounds of preparation filtering through the walls. Footsteps in the hallways, doors slamming, voices speaking in clipped, urgent tones. The house had transformed from a gilded cage into a fortress, preparing for siege. She tried Adrian's phone 3 times. Each call went straight to voicemail. At dawn, Anna arrived with breakfast Clara couldn't eat and news that made her stomach turn. Mr. Volkov wanted me to inform you that he'll be gone for most of the day, Anna said, setting down a tray of coffee and pastries. He's attending to business matters that require his personal attention. Business matters, Clara repeated flatly. You mean he's going to war? Anna's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. Mr. Volkov is doing what's necessary to ensure your safety and the stability of his organization. The specifics are not my place to discuss. How many people are going to die today, Anna? The older woman was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, miss, but I've worked for Mr. Volkov long enough to understand that when he makes a decision, he follows through completely. Whatever happens today, it will be decisive. After Anna left, Clara paced the small room like a caged animal. The steel shutters over the windows prevented her from seeing outside, and the red emergency lighting made everything feel surreal, nightmarish. She was trapped in a bubble, while somewhere in the city, Adrian was orchestrating violence she could only imagine. The morning crawled past with agonizing slowness. No updates came. No messages. Clara tried to distract herself with television, but every channel seemed to be showing news of breaking stories across the city. A warehouse fire in the industrial district, reports of gunfire near the waterfront, police responding to multiple incidents involving suspected organized crime. The war was playing out in real time, broadcast to millions of people who had no idea what they were really witnessing. Around noon, the power flickered. Clara's heart leaped into her throat. The backup generators kicked in immediately, but for 3 seconds, everything had gone dark. She grabbed her phone, checking for messages. Nothing from Adrian, but there was a new text from the unknown number that had threatened her the night before. "He can't protect you forever. When this is over, you're mine." Clara's hand shook as she deleted the message, but the words remained burned into her mind. Victor wasn't giving up. If anything, Adrian's defensive seemed to be making him more determined. She was reaching for the landline to call Dmitri when she heard it. Gunfire. Close. Not distant like the night before, but here, on the property. Clara ran to the panic button, her finger hovering over it, but hesitated. Adrian had said not to use it unless she was in immediate danger. Was this immediate danger, or just the security team responding to a threat? The gunfire intensified. Automatic weapons, the staccato rhythm unmistakable even to her untrained ears. Then shouting in Russian, commands being barked, someone screaming. Clara pressed the button. Nothing happened. She pressed it again, harder this time, panic rising in her chest. Still nothing. The backup system had failed. Whether through sabotage or malfunction, she was cut off from help. Clara grabbed her phone and dialed Adrian, straight to voicemail. She tried Dmitri, same result. Anna's number rang and rang without answer. The gunfire was getting closer. Clara looked around the room desperately, searching for anything she could use as a weapon. The best she could find was a heavy lamp, which she clutched with shaking hands as she backed into the corner farthest from the door. Footsteps thundered in the hallway outside. Multiple people, moving fast. Then silence. Clara held her breath, the lamp raised above her head. The door exploded inward with a deafening crash. 3 men in tactical gear poured into the room, weapons drawn. Clara screamed and hurled the lamp at the nearest one. It caught him in the shoulder, barely slowing him down. "Don't shoot her, you idiot!" one of them barked in accented English. "Victor wants her alive." Strong hands grabbed Clara, wrenching her arms behind her back. She fought, kicking and twisting, but they were professionals, and she was hopelessly outmatched. Something sharp pricked her neck, a needle, and the world immediately started to blur at the edges. "No," Clara gasped, her legs giving out. "No, please!" But consciousness was already slipping away, the room spinning into darkness as whoever had injected her caught her falling body. The last thing she heard was one of the men speaking into a radio. "Package secured. Extraction in progress. Tell Victor we'll be at the secondary location in 20 minutes. Then nothing. Clara woke to the smell of rust and mildew and the pounding ache of a sedative hangover. Her head felt like it had been filled with concrete, her mouth dry as sand. She tried to move and discovered her hands were zip-tied behind her back, secured to a metal chair. Panic flared hot and immediate. She forced her eyes open. The room was windowless, lit by a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. Concrete walls, water-stained and crumbling. A basement, maybe, or a warehouse. The floor was stained with things Clara didn't want to identify. A door opened behind her. Footsteps approached, unhurried and confident. "Miss Bennett." Finally awake. The voice was cultured, almost pleasant, with a Russian accent more pronounced than Adrian's. A man moved into her field of vision. Late 50s, silver hair, expensive suit that looked wrong in this squalid space. His eyes were the palest blue Clara had ever seen, and utterly devoid of warmth. "Victor Zakharov," Clara whispered, her voice hoarse. "Ah, so Adrian has spoken of me. I'm flattered." Victor pulled up a second chair, spinning it around to sit with his arms resting on the back. "I apologize for the accommodations. Not what you've grown accustomed to at Adrian's estate, I imagine. But this location serves its purpose." Clara's mind was racing, trying to cut through the fog of whatever drug they'd given her. "If you're going to kill me, just do it. Don't waste time with the villain monologue." Victor laughed. genuinely amused. I like you. Spirit. Adrian always did appreciate women with backbone. His expression sobered. But no, I'm not going to kill you. At least, not yet. You're far too valuable alive. As leverage against Adrian. Precisely. You see, your lover has been quite aggressive today. 3 of my warehouses burned, 2 of my lieutenants dead. He's even managed to turn some of my own people against me. Victor's jaw tightened. Adrian Volkov has declared total war, and he's doing it for you, which tells me exactly how much you're worth to him. He won't negotiate, Clara said, trying to sound more certain than she felt. Adrian doesn't compromise. Everyone compromises when the stakes are high enough. Victor pulled out his phone, swiped through to a video, and held it up for Clara to see. The footage showed Adrian's estate, or what was left of it. Smoke poured from multiple windows. Emergency vehicles clustered around the perimeter. Bodies covered with sheets lay scattered across the front lawn. Clara's breath caught. You're lying. That's not 20 minutes ago, Victor interrupted. While you were being extracted, I had a secondary team hit the estate. 40 men with enough firepower to level a small country. Most of Adrian's security detail is dead or wounded. The house itself is badly damaged. He paused. Your friend Anna didn't make it. I'm told she died defending your empty room, which was rather pointless of her. Tears burned Clara's eyes. Anna, who had shown her nothing but kindness. Marcus and Irina, who had fed her and made her feel less alone. All the staff who had treated her like a guest rather than a prisoner. You're a monster, she choked out. Perhaps, but I'm a monster who's winning. Victor stood, pocketing his phone. Adrian will receive proof that you're alive within the hour, along with my demands. He has 48 hours to dismantle his entire organization, transfer all assets to me, and present himself for execution. If he complies, you'll be released unharmed. And if he doesn't? Victor's smile was cold. Then I'll send him pieces of you until he does, starting with fingers and working my way up to more vital parts. He left before Clara could respond, the door slamming shut behind him. She heard locks engaging, multiple deadbolts sliding into place. Clara sat in the dim light, shaking with fear and rage and grief, and tried to think. Adrian would come for her. She knew that with absolute certainty. But he'd be walking into a trap. Victor would never honor any deal. He'd take everything Adrian offered and kill them both anyway, unless she could find a way out first. Clara tested the zip ties binding her wrists. They were professional grade, tight enough to cut into her skin, but not so tight that they'd cut off circulation. The chair she was secured to was metal, bolted to the floor. No obvious weak points, but the chair had a welded crossbar at the back that the zip ties were looped through. If she could somehow break that weld or slip the ties over the top. Clara stood awkwardly, the chair coming with her, and immediately overbalanced. She crashed to the concrete floor hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. Pain exploded through her shoulder, but she bit back the scream. She needed to be quiet, needed to not alert her captors that she was trying to escape. It took 3 tries to get back to a sitting position with the chair still attached. Her shoulder throbbed where she'd hit the ground, and she could feel something warm trickling down her arm. Blood from where the zip ties had cut into her wrist during the fall. But pain meant she was alive. Alive meant she could fight. Clara tried a different approach. She worked her hands back and forth, ignoring the burning sensation as plastic dug into skin, trying to stretch the ties even fractionally. Her wrists were slick with blood now, which actually helped. The lubrication made the ties slide more easily. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Time had become elastic, meaningless in this concrete tomb. Finally, impossibly, Clara felt the zip tie on her left hand slip. Not break, but slip slightly looser. She pulled harder, gasping at the pain, and her hand came free in a rush that left her lightheaded. She quickly freed her other hand, then stood on shaking legs and assessed the damage. Her wrists were raw and bleeding, her shoulder screaming in protest from the fall, but she was mobile. Now she just needed to find a way out. Clara moved to the door and pressed her ear against it, listening. She could hear voices somewhere distant, male, speaking Russian. At least 2 people, maybe more. No way to know how many Victor had left to guard her. The door was solid metal with no interior handle. Even if it wasn't locked, she couldn't open it from this side. Clara turned her attention to the rest of the room. There had to be another way out, a ventilation shaft, a weak point in the walls, something. She was examining a particularly crumbling section of concrete when the sound of gunfire erupted somewhere above her. Clara's heart leaped. Adrian. It had to be. The gunfire intensified, a full-scale assault by the sound of it. Men shouting, footsteps running, the distinctive crack of different weapons creating a chaotic symphony of violence. Then closer, right outside her door. Clara grabbed the only weapon she could find, a length of broken pipe that had been lying in the corner, and pressed herself against the wall beside the door. The locks disengaged. The door swung open. Clara swung the pipe with all her strength. It connected with someone's head with a sickening thunk. The man, one of Victor's guards, dropped like a stone. But there was a second guard right behind him, and this one was faster. He grabbed Clara's wrist before she could swing again, twisting until she dropped the pipe with a cry of pain. "Stupid girl!" he snarled in English, pulling a knife from his belt. Victor said no permanent damage, but I can hurt you plenty without... The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. The guard's eyes went wide. He looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest, then collapsed. Adrian stood in the doorway, gun raised, his expression absolutely feral. Blood covered him head to toe. So much blood that Clara couldn't tell if any of it was his. His eyes swept the room, cataloging threats with professional efficiency before landing on Clara. "Are you hurt?" His voice was rough, barely controlled. "My wrists, my shoulder, but I'm okay. Adrian, Victor, is dead." Adrian stepped over the bodies of the guards, moving toward Clara with single-minded focus. "I put 3 bullets in his head myself. His organization is finished. This is over." He reached for her, then stopped, looking down at his blood-covered hands. "I'm covered in..." He started to pull back, but Clara closed the distance between them, throwing her arms around his neck despite the gore. "I don't care," she said fiercely. "I don't care." Adrian's arms came around her, crushing her against him with enough force to hurt. She felt him shaking, whether from adrenaline or relief or something else entirely. "When I got to the estate and saw what they'd done," Adrian said against her hair, his voice breaking. "When I realized they had you. Clara, I've never been that scared in my entire life. I'm okay. I'm here. I'm safe. Because you freed yourself." Adrian pulled back just enough to look at her raw, bleeding wrists. Something dark and violent flashed across his face. "They did this to you. It was the zip ties. I had to. They put their hands on you, hurt you, took you." Each word was punctuated with barely restrained fury. If Victor wasn't already dead, I'd kill him again, slower. I'd make it last days. "Adrian." Clara cupped his face, forcing him to focus on her. "It's over. You said so yourself. Victor's dead. I'm safe. We survived." He searched her eyes, and gradually the murderous rage faded into something more human, more broken. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered. "When Dmitri called and told me they'd breached the secure room, that you were gone, I thought I'd lost you. But you didn't. You found me. Because I burned half the city to the ground looking for you." Adrian's smile was bitter. "I tortured 3 of Victor's men before one of them finally gave me this location. I killed everyone between me and this room. Everyone, Clara. I didn't give them a chance to surrender. I needed to get to you." Clara understood what he was telling her, understood the line he'd crossed, the monster he'd become to save her, and she understood that he was waiting for her to recoil, to be horrified by what he'd done. Instead, she kissed him. Adrian made a sound somewhere between a sob and a laugh, and kissed her back with desperate intensity. They clung to each other in that blood-soaked basement, survivors of a war neither of them had wanted, and Clara realized that some part of her had changed irreversibly. She'd looked into the darkness and chosen to step into it rather than away from it, because standing in the light without Adrian felt lonelier than any shadow. "We need to go," Adrian said eventually, pulling back reluctantly. "The police will be here soon. I've called in favors to delay them, but we don't have much time." He led her out of the basement and up a narrow staircase. The building above was carnage. Bodies sprawled in hallways, walls riddled with bullet holes, the acrid smell of gunpowder thick in the air. Clara tried not to look too closely at the faces of the dead. Outside, 3 black SUVs were waiting, engines running. Dmitri stood by the nearest one, looking battered but alive. His eyes widened when he saw Clara. "Thank God," he said simply. "The estate?" Adrian asked as he helped Clara into the vehicle. "Still standing, but barely. Fires contained. We lost 12 people total." Dimitri's voice was heavy. "Anna Marcus, 4 guards, 6 household staff." Clara felt the grief hit her like a physical blow. Marcus with his ego and his perfect sandwiches. Anna with her stern kindness. All gone because she'd walked into a party wearing a red dress. "It's not your fault," Adrian said, reading her expression. He climbed into the SUV beside her, pulling her against his side. "Don't carry their deaths, Clara. Victor killed them. Not you." But as the convoy pulled away from the warehouse, Clara wasn't sure she believed that. The drive back to the estate felt surreal. Dawn was breaking over the city, painting everything in shades of pink and gold that seemed obscene, given what had just transpired. Police sirens wailed in the distance, converging on multiple locations. News helicopters circled overhead. The war had gone public in a way that couldn't be hidden or explained away. "What happens now?" Clara asked quietly. Adrian was silent for a moment. "Now comes the cleanup. Victor's organization will fragment without him, which means power struggles and violence as people fight to fill the vacuum. The police will investigate, but I have enough people in my pocket to manage that. And we—" He trailed off. "We what?" "We figure out what comes next." Adrian looked down at her, his expression unreadable. "Victor's dead, which means you're no longer in immediate danger. I'll still have enemies, but none with the resources or motivation to target you specifically, which means you can leave. Go back to your old life. Be free of all this." Clara's chest tightened. "Is that what you want?" "What I want is irrelevant. This is about what's best for you." "Let me decide what's best for me." Clara pulled away slightly so she could meet his eyes. "Do you want me to leave?" Adrian's jaw worked. "No," he admitted finally. "I want you to stay. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep next to you every night. I want to teach you to shoot so you can protect yourself. I want to take you to places that aren't crime scenes or safe houses. I want—" He shook his head. "I want things I have no right to want." "What if I want them too?" "Then you're making a terrible decision." But there was hope in his voice, fragile and desperate. "Probably," Clara agreed. "But I've spent my entire life being invisible. Being safe, being forgettable. And it was empty, Adrian. So completely empty. Then you saw me and everything changed. I became visible, dangerous, alive. You almost died. But I didn't. We didn't." Clara took his hand, lacing their fingers together despite the dried blood on both of them. "I'm not saying I understand your world or that I'm comfortable with the violence. I'm not saying I can just forget what happened or pretend it was okay. But I'm saying I want to try, to see if there's a way forward that doesn't involve me running away from the first real thing I've felt in years." Adrian pulled her back into his arms, holding her like she might disappear if he let go. "You're absolutely insane. Probably runs in the family now." His laugh was shaky. "We're going to have rules. Serious ones. You don't get involved in business. You get trained in self-defense and weapons. You have your own security detail. And if things get dangerous again, you leave. No arguments." "Agreed. On one condition." "What?" "You let me see all of you, not just the parts you think are acceptable. The darkness, too. Because if I'm choosing this, I'm choosing all of it, not just the gilded cage and the nice dinners." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. "That's asking to see things that might make you leave anyway." "Then I'll leave. But at least I'll leave knowing the truth rather than running from a shadow." Clara squeezed his hand. "I need honesty, Adrian. Complete honesty. Can you give me that?" "Yes," he said finally. "It terrifies me, but yes." The estate came into view as they rounded the final turn. Clara's breath caught. One entire wing was nothing but charred framework, smoke still rising from the ruins. Emergency vehicles crowded the driveway. People in various states of injury sat on the lawn, being treated by medics. But the core of the house still stood. Damaged, but not destroyed. Rather like her, Clara thought. They pulled up to the main entrance and immediately people surrounded the SUV. Dimitri barking orders, security personnel forming a protective circle. Someone Clara didn't recognize demanding Adrian's attention. But before Adrian could step out, he turned to Clara one more time. "Last chance," he said quietly. "I can have Dimitri take you anywhere you want to go. Give you money to start over, protection until you're settled. You can walk away from all of this right now, and I won't stop you." Clara looked at the destroyed estate, the injured people, the chaos that would be her life if she stayed. Then she looked at Adrian, covered in blood, exhausted, vulnerable in a way she suspected few people ever saw. "I'm not going anywhere," she said firmly. Adrian's smile was small but genuine. "Then welcome to the rest of your life, Clara Bennett. I promise it won't be boring." "I'm counting on it." They stepped out of the SUV together, into the smoke and chaos and aftermath of war, and Clara felt something settle in her chest. Not peace exactly, not comfort, but certainty. She'd spent 26 years being invisible. She'd rather be visible and terrified than safe and alone. The aftermath of war, Clara discovered, was quieter than the war itself, but somehow more devastating. The first week passed in a blur of funerals, police interviews carefully orchestrated by Adrian's lawyers, and the slow, painful work of rebuilding. Clara attended every service for the staff who'd died protecting her, standing beside Adrian as they laid Anna and Marcus and 10 others to rest. She memorized their names, their faces in the photographs displayed beside their caskets, the grief of their families. This was the price of her survival. These were the lives traded for hers. "You don't have to torture yourself like this," Adrian said after the third funeral, watching her stare at Anna's photograph in the memorial program. "Yes, I do," Clara said quietly. "If I'm choosing this life, I need to understand what it costs, what it's already cost." Adrian didn't argue. He simply took her hand and held it while she grieved for people she'd barely known, but who'd died for her anyway. The estate repairs took longer. The destroyed wing would need to be completely rebuilt, a process that would take months. In the meantime, Adrian moved them to one of his other properties, a penthouse downtown that had better security and fewer memories. Clara helped pack her belongings from the bedroom she'd occupied for barely 2 weeks and found herself surprised by how much had accumulated. Clothes she'd never chosen, books she'd started but never finished, a life she'd been building without realizing it. "I want to go back to my apartment," Clara said one evening as they sat in the penthouse living room, city lights sprawling beneath them. "Just once, to get my things." Adrian looked up from his laptop. "Dimitri can arrange that. I'll have a team. I want to go alone." The silence that followed was heavy. "That's not possible," Adrian said finally. "Clara, we discussed this. Security isn't negotiable. I'm not asking to go unprotected. I'm asking to go without an armed escort visible to everyone in my building." Clara set down her wine glass. "My neighbors, my landlord, my life, it's all still there, and I need to see it one more time before I fully commit to leaving it behind." "You could be recognized," followed. "By who? Victor's dead. His organization collapsed. You said yourself that I'm no longer a high-value target." Adrian's jaw tightened. "There are always threats, Clara. Always people looking for leverage, for weakness, for opportunity. Then I'll be careful. I'll wear a hat, sunglasses, whatever you want. But Adrian, I need this. I need to close that door myself, not just have it closed for me." They stared at each other, and Clara could see the conflict playing out across his features. The crime lord who'd survived by trusting no one warring with the man who loved her enough to try. Finally, Adrian nodded slowly. "Tomorrow, midday. Dimitri drives you but waits in the car. You have 30 minutes, and you wear this." He pulled something from his pocket, a sleek smartwatch. "GPS tracking, panic button, and a direct line to me. Non-negotiable." Clara took the watch, understanding the compromise for what it was. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If anything goes wrong, I'm never letting you out of my sight again." The next day, Clara found herself standing outside her old apartment building for the first time in 3 weeks. It looked exactly the same cracked sidewalk, the same faded awning, the same elderly doorman reading his newspaper. She'd lived here for 4 years, and it had always felt like a temporary stopping point rather than a home. Now it felt like visiting a museum dedicated to someone else's life. Clara let herself into the apartment and was struck immediately by how small everything was. The entire space could fit inside the penthouse living room twice over. The furniture was cheap, the walls bare except for a few forgettable prints she'd bought at a discount store. There were no photographs, no personal touches, nothing that spoke to who Clara Bennett actually was, because she hadn't been anyone, just a shadow pretending to be a person. She moved through the rooms methodically, packing clothes she actually wanted to keep, a few books, some jewelry that had belonged to her mother. Most of it she left behind, artifacts of a life that no longer fit the person she'd become. Clara was boxing up items from her bathroom when her phone rang. Not the new phone Adrian had given her, but her old one, charging on the kitchen counter where she'd left it weeks ago. The caller ID showed Meredith's name. Clara stared at it for 3 rings before answering. "Hello?" "Clara, oh my God, where have you been?" Meredith's voice was frantic with relief. "I've been calling for weeks. You just disappeared after my party, and I thought—" She broke off. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Clara said, which was both true and completely inadequate. "I'm sorry I didn't call. Things have been complicated." "Complicated?" "Clara, there was a gang war. People died. I saw your picture on the news. They said you were connected to Adrian Volkov." Meredith's voice dropped to a whisper. "Please tell me you're not in trouble." Clara looked around her empty apartment, thought about the penthouse where Adrian was probably wearing a hole in the floor worrying about her, remembered the basement where she'd been held captive and the moment she'd chosen to stay anyway. "I'm not in trouble," she said finally. "At least not the kind you're thinking." "Then what kind?" "The kind where I fell in love with someone dangerous and decided that was okay." Meredith was silent for a long moment. "Adrian Volkov. You're with Adrian Volkov?" "Yes." "Clara, he's a criminal. He kills people." "I know what he is." Clara sat down on her worn couch. "I know all of it, Mare. The violence, the darkness, the danger. And I'm choosing it anyway." "Why?" Meredith sounded genuinely baffled. "You could have anyone. You could have a normal life, a safe life." "I had a safe life," Clara interrupted. 26 years of being invisible and forgettable and so completely empty. And then Adrian looked at me like I mattered, like I was someone worth seeing, and everything changed. She paused. "I'm not asking you to understand it. I'm just asking you to trust that I know what I'm doing." "Do you? Know what you're doing?" Clara thought about that. "No," she admitted. "Not really. But I'd rather figure it out with him than be safe without him." Meredith sighed. "You're either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. If he hurts you, he won't. Not intentionally." Clara stood looking around her apartment one last time. "Mare, I need to go. But thank you for calling, for caring, for being my friend even when I disappeared." "Will I see you again?" "I don't know. Maybe, if things settle down." Clara smiled sadly. "Take care of yourself, Meredith." She hung up before her friend could respond, before the emotion could crack her voice completely. Then she finished packing, took one final look at the life she was leaving behind, and walked out without locking the door. Some exits didn't require ceremony. Dmitri was waiting by the car, his eyes constantly scanning the street for threats. When he saw Clara carrying only 2 boxes, his eyebrows rose. "That's everything?" he asked. "That's everything that matters," Clara confirmed. The drive back to the penthouse was quiet. Clara watched the city pass by the window and thought about the girl who'd lived in that apartment. Invisible, safe, alone. That girl would have been horrified by what Clara had become, would have run screaming from Adrian and his world. But that girl had never really been alive. Adrian was pacing when Clara entered the penthouse, and the relief on his face when he saw her was almost comical. 32 minutes, he said, checking his watch. "You went 2 minutes over." I had a phone call from Meredith." Clara set down her boxes. "She wanted to make sure I hadn't been murdered." "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That I'm choosing this. Choosing you." Clara crossed to him, took his hands. "She thinks I'm insane. She's not wrong." "Probably not." Clara rose on her toes and kissed him. "But I'm committed to this particular brand of insanity now." Adrian's arms came around her waist. "No regrets? Ask me again in 50 years. His laugh was soft. "Deal." The weeks that followed fell into a new rhythm. Adrian taught Clara to shoot, starting with handguns and working up to more serious weaponry. She was terrible at first, flinching at every report, her hands shaking too much for accuracy. But gradually she improved. Learned to breathe through the fear, to focus, to hit targets with increasing precision. "You're a natural," Adrian said after she hit the center mass 3 times in a row at 20 yards. "I have a good teacher." Claire set down the gun, removing her ear protection. "Though I hope I never actually have to use this on a person." "So do I. But if you do, don't hesitate. Center mass, keep firing until the threat stops moving. Your life is worth more than their guilt." Clara nodded, understanding this was one of those lessons that came from hard experience. Adrian had survived this long by being ruthless when necessary. If she wanted to survive beside him, she'd need to learn the same. Dmitri became an unexpected friend. He taught Clara how to spot surveillance, how to vary her routes, how to read a room for exits and threats. They sparred together twice a week, Clara learning basic self-defense while Dmitri pulled his punches and pretended she was actually landing hits. "You're getting better," he said after she managed to almost break his hold on her arm. "You're patronizing me," Clara shot back, breathing hard. "A little, but you really are improving." Dmitri helped her up from the mat. "6 months ago, you wouldn't have even tried to fight back. Now you've got instincts. That matters." Adrian's business continued, though Clara saw little of it directly. He kept his promises about separation, never discussing specifics in front of her, never involving her in decisions or meetings. But she heard enough to understand that his empire was restructuring, becoming more legitimate in the wake of Victor's death. "I'm divesting from the drug trade," Adrian told her one night over dinner. "Weapons, too. Focusing on businesses that can't be traced back to violence." "Why?" "Because I'm tired of funerals. And because—" He paused. "Because I want to build something that doesn't require constant bloodshed to maintain." "I've been doing this for 15 years, Clara. Victor's death reminded me that this life has an expiration date, and I'd rather reach mine naturally than with a bullet in my head." "What will you do instead?" "Real estate, shipping, legitimate investments. I'll never be completely clean. Too much history for that. But I can be cleaner. Better." He met her eyes. "For you. For us." Clara reached across the table and took his hand. "For you too. You deserve a life that isn't just survival." "Do I?" The question was genuinely uncertain. "Yes," Clara said firmly. "You do." 3 months after Victor's death, Adrian proposed. It wasn't romantic. There were no candles, no orchestrated moment, no ring and champagne. They were in the rebuilt estate, the construction finally complete, walking through rooms that smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. Adrian stopped in what would become their shared bedroom, looking out at the grounds where so many people had died defending them. "Marry me," he said without preamble. Clara turned from examining the new closet. "What?" "Marry me. I know it's fast and probably insane, but I don't care. I want you to be my wife. Legally, publicly, permanently." Adrian crossed to her, taking her hands. "I want everyone in this world to know that you're mine and I'm yours. I want to wake up every morning with that certainty. I want—" "Yes," Clara interrupted. Adrian blinked. "Yes?" "Yes, I'll marry you." Clara smiled. "Did you really think I'd say no after everything we've survived?" "I thought you might want time to think about it." I've thought about it. Every day since I decided to stay, I've been thinking about it." Clara cupped his face. "I love you, Adrian Volkov. You're dangerous and damaged, and sometimes you terrify me. But you're also brave and loyal, and you love me completely. So yes, absolutely yes." Adrian kissed her with enough intensity to steal her breath, backing her against the wall, his hands in her hair. "We're doing this," he murmured against her lips. "Actually doing this. Did you doubt it? Every single day." They were married 4 weeks later in a small ceremony at the estate. No press, no public announcement, just a handful of people who mattered. Dmitri stood as Adrian's best man. Meredith, after much persuasion and several security briefings, agreed to be Clara's maid of honor. Sergei attended with barely concealed approval, along with a few other members of Adrian's organization who'd earned his trust. Clara wore white, not the crimson that had started everything, but pristine white that felt like a fresh beginning. Adrian wore black because some things never changed. The officiant was a retired judge who owed Adrian several significant favors and knew better than to ask questions. The vows were traditional, though Clara added one line at the end. I promise to see you, she said, looking into Adrian's gray eyes. Really see you. On your worst days and your best days. For the rest of our days? Adrian's voice was rough when he responded. I promise to be worth seeing. When they kissed as husband and wife, everyone applauded. But Clara only heard Adrian's heartbeat against hers, steady and strong and alive. The reception was subdued by most wedding standards, but perfect for them. Marcus's replacement, a chef named Sophia, who'd apprenticed under Marcus and insisted on honoring his memory, prepared a feast. There was music, dancing, champagne that probably cost more than Clara's old apartment. Clara danced with Dmitri, who was surprisingly graceful for someone built like a tank. You know, when boss first brought you here, I thought you'd last maybe a week, he admitted. Figured you'd either run screaming or break down completely. I almost did, several times. But you didn't. You stayed, fought, became stronger. Dmitri spun her expertly. You're good for him, Clara. Adrian's been alone his whole life. He needed someone who could match him, challenge him, love him despite knowing exactly what he is. He's good for me too, Clara said softly. I was invisible before him, empty. He made me real. Then you saved each other. Dmitri smiled. That's rare in this world. Hold on to it. Later, when the guests had departed and the staff was cleaning up, Adrian and Clara stood on the repaired balcony overlooking the grounds. The garden where Clara had once sat crying while planning impossible escapes now held flower beds and a fountain, beautiful and peaceful in the moonlight. Do you regret it? Adrian asked quietly. Any of it. Clara thought about the question seriously, about the fear and the violence and the people who'd died, about Anna and Marcus and the life she'd left behind, about the danger that would always exist at the edges of their existence. No, she said finally. I regret the loss of life. I regret that people were hurt because of us. But choosing you, choosing this? No regrets. Even knowing it will never be completely safe? That there will always be threats, always people who want to hurt me by hurting you? Even knowing that. Clara turned to face him. Adrian, I spent 26 years being safe and it felt like being dead. I'd rather have 10 dangerous years with you than 50 safe years alone. You're getting way more than 10 years, Adrian said firmly. We're doing this until we're old and gray and boring. You could never be boring. Want to bet? He pulled her close. I plan to be the most boring retired crime lord in history. We'll get a dog, maybe two, garden. I'll take up something ridiculous like golf. Clara laughed. I'll believe it when I see it. Give me time. I'm very committed to disappointing my past self. They stood together in the darkness, and Clara thought about the night she'd worn a red dress to a party and caught the attention of a dangerous man. Thought about how a single moment had changed everything, had transformed her from invisible to vital, from empty to full. Some people would say she'd been corrupted, that Adrian had pulled her into darkness. But Clara knew the truth. She'd found light in the darkness, had found someone who saw her completely and loved her anyway, who'd burned the world to keep her safe and was now trying to rebuild it into something better. The months that followed were quieter than anything Clara had experienced since entering Adrian's world. There were no more wars, no more midnight raids, no more fear that every knock on the door might bring violence. Adrian kept his word about going legitimate. He sold off the last of his criminal enterprises, paying generous severance to everyone affected. Some adapted to the new businesses he was building. Others moved on, and Adrian let them go without interference. The transformation wasn't complete, probably never would be. Too much history. Too many connections that couldn't be completely severed. But Adrian was trying, genuinely trying, to build something that didn't require constant vigilance to maintain. Clara started taking classes at the university, finally finishing the degree she'd abandoned years ago. She studied business management with the half-formed idea that she might help Adrian run his legitimate enterprises. He'd offered her a position immediately, but she'd refused. I want to earn it, she'd said. Want to bring actual skills to the table, not just be the boss's wife. Adrian had respected that, though he'd also immediately hired the best tutors money could buy to support her education. They established routines, morning coffee together, discussing the day ahead. Dinners when Adrian's schedule allowed, talking about everything and nothing. Weekends at the estate, walking the grounds, planning improvements, building a life that was theirs. Clara met more of Adrian's legitimate business associates, entrepreneurs and executives who knew his history but chose to work with him anyway. She learned to navigate that world, to hold her own in conversations about markets and investments and strategic planning. But it was the quiet moments she treasured most. Adrian reading beside her in the library, their fingers intertwined, cooking together in the new kitchen Sophia had helped design. Falling asleep tangled together, safe and warm and home. One evening, nearly a year after Victor's death, Clara found Adrian in his study, staring at a photograph she'd never seen before. It showed a younger Adrian, maybe 13 or 14, standing beside an older man who shared his features. "Your father," Clara said, sitting on the edge of his desk. "Yeah." Adrian set down this photo. "He died when I was 16. Heart attack, officially, but I've always suspected it was poison. One of his enemies finally getting close enough. I'm sorry. Don't be. He was a bastard who beat me regularly and expected me to become exactly what I became." Adrian's voice was flat. "I hated him. But I also built my entire life trying to surpass him, prove I was better, stronger, more successful." "And did you? Surpass him?" "In every measurable way. Bigger empire, more money, more power." Adrian looked up at her. "But he died alone, paranoid, trusting no one. And I almost did the same thing until you walked into my life." Clara slid off the desk and into his lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. "You're not him, Adrian. You're better than him. Because you're capable of change, of growth, of love. He clearly wasn't. Sometimes I worry I'll fail you, that the violence in me will resurface, that I'll drag you back into the darkness I'm trying to leave behind. Then we'll face it together." Clara kissed his forehead. "That's what marriage means, right? Not just the good parts, but all of it." Adrian held her tighter. "I love you. I don't say it enough, but I do. More than I thought I was capable of loving anyone." "I know. You show me every day." That night, Clara dreamed of the party where it all began. But in the dream, when she walked past Adrian, she didn't stop, didn't turn around, just kept walking until she disappeared into the crowd, anonymous and invisible once more. She woke gasping, her heart racing. Adrian was immediately alert beside her. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, just a dream." Clara pressed against him, feeling his solid warmth. "A nightmare about staying invisible." "You could never be invisible to me." Adrian's arms came around her. "You blazed into my life like a comet, and everything changed. Changed me." "Good changed or bad changed?" "The best kind of changed, the kind that actually matters." Clara smiled in the darkness. "Go back to sleep. I'm okay." But she stayed awake a while longer, listening to Adrian's breathing even out, thinking about the path that had led her here. All the choices, good and bad. All the fear and courage and desperate hope that love might be enough. It had been enough. Against all odds, despite every danger and obstacle, it had been enough. 2 years after their wedding, Clara graduated with honors. Adrian attended the ceremony with Dmitri, cheering embarrassingly loud when she crossed the stage. That night, he took her to the finest restaurant in the city, where he'd arranged a private room. "I'm proud of you," he said over champagne. "Not just for the degree, but for everything. For being brave enough to build your own identity. Even here. Even with me." "I learned from the best." Clara raised her glass. "To new beginnings." "To new beginnings," Adrian echoed. A week later, Clara started working at Adrian's primary holding company. Not as his wife, but as a junior analyst who had to prove herself like everyone else. The other employees were initially wary, unsure how to treat the boss's wife. But Clara's competence and willingness to do the unglamorous work won them over. She was good at it, she discovered, had an instinct for patterns and opportunities that surprised even her. Within 6 months, she was leading projects. Within a year, she'd been promoted twice on merit alone. Adrian watched her transformation with quiet pride, never interfering, never pulling rank on her behalf. This was her victory to earn. They were having dinner on the estate's newly renovated terrace when Clara realized how far they'd come. The grounds were peaceful, the house full of life again. Staff who'd been with them for years, gardens that bloomed with careful cultivation, no more ghosts lurking in the corners. I have something to tell you, Clara said, setting down her wine glass. Adrian looked up, immediately alert. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Something's right. Clara took a deep breath. I'm pregnant. The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. Then Adrian's face transformed, joy and terror and wonder all colliding at once. You're sure? 3 tests, all positive. I have a doctor's appointment scheduled for next week. Clara watched him carefully. We never really discussed children. If you're not ready, not ready. Adrian was out of his chair, pulling her up, his hands framing her face. Clara, I've spent my whole life building an empire with no one to pass it to, no legacy beyond money and fear. And now, his voice cracked, now we get to build something real, a family, a future. You're happy? Clara needed to hear it. I'm terrified, Adrian admitted. I have no idea how to be a father. My own father was a nightmare. What if I mess this up? What if I can't protect them? What if... Clara kissed him, silencing the spiral of worry. You'll be amazing, because you're already capable of so much love, and because we'll figure it out together, just like we figured out everything else. Adrian kissed her back, then dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead against her still flat stomach. I promise I'll keep you safe, he whispered. Both of you. Whatever it takes. Clara's hands tangled in his hair, and she felt tears slip down her cheeks. Happy tears for the first time in longer than she could remember. Their daughter was born on a crisp autumn morning, screaming her arrival with impressive volume. She had Adrian's gray eyes and Clara's stubborn chin, and from the moment the nurse placed her in Adrian's arms, he was completely undone. She's perfect, he breathed, cradling her with the careful reverence of someone holding the entire world. Clara, she's absolutely perfect. What should we name her? Clara asked from the hospital bed, exhausted and exhilarated. Adrian looked down at the tiny face, then back at Clara. Anna, he said softly. After the woman who died protecting you. If you're okay with that. Fresh tears spilled down Clara's cheeks. It's perfect. Little Anna Volkov entered the world with no knowledge of the violence that had preceded her birth, no understanding of the empire her father had built and dismantled. She was simply loved, fiercely and completely, by 2 people who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen to step into the light together. Dmitri became Uncle Dmitri, showing up with increasingly ridiculous stuffed animals and teaching Anna to say his name before she could say Dada, much to Adrian's mock outrage. Sophia taught Clara to cook traditional Russian dishes, insisting Anna should know her heritage. The estate filled with the sounds of a child growing up. Laughter and crying, and the patter of small feet on marble floors that had once echoed with gunfire. Adrian proved to be a devoted, if slightly overprotective father. He read to Anna every night, taught her to be brave but cautious, showed her that strength could be gentle and power could be used for good. Clara watched him transform from crime lord to businessman to father, and loved him more with each evolution. On Anna's 5th birthday, Clara found Adrian in his study, looking at the photograph of his own father again. You're nothing like him, she said, coming to stand beside him. I hope not. Adrian set down the photo. But I worry sometimes. The violence in me, the capacity for darkness. What if Anna inherits that? Then we'll teach her to choose the light, just like you did, just like you're still doing every single day. Clara took his hand. Adrian, you've spent 5 years being an incredible father. You've shown her love, taught her kindness, built a world where she can be safe and happy. That's not your father's legacy. That's yours. Adrian pulled her into his arms, and they stood together in the study that had once been a command center for criminal operations and was now simply a home office where a father worked while his daughter played nearby. Thank you, Adrian said against her hair. For what? For seeing me. For saving me. For giving me a reason to become someone worth saving. You were always worth saving, Clara said firmly. You just needed to believe it. Years continued to pass, each one building on the last. Adrian's businesses thrived. Clara became a respected executive in her own right. Anna grew into a smart, confident child who knew her father had a complicated past, but loved him fiercely anyway. They faced challenges, of course. Old enemies occasionally surfaced, requiring careful management. The press sometimes dredged up Adrian's history. Anna asked difficult questions as she got older, and they answered honestly, age-appropriately together. But they weathered everything as a family, united and strong. On the 10th anniversary of the night they'd met, Adrian took Clara back to the building where the fateful party had occurred. It was under new ownership now, converted to luxury condos. But the penthouse where it all began was available for private events. Adrian had rented it for the evening. "This is where I first saw you," he said, leading her to the exact spot where she'd walked past him in that crimson dress. "Right here. You were trying so hard to be invisible, and I couldn't look away." "I was terrified," Clara admitted. "Of you, of the attention, of everything." "And now?" Clara looked around the space, remembering the girl she'd been, alone, empty, invisible. Then she looked at Adrian, thought about their daughter sleeping safely at home with Dimitri and Sophia watching over her, thought about the life they'd built from violence and fear and desperate hope. "Now I'm home," she said simply. Adrian pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a necklace, a simple pendant in the shape of a crimson teardrop. "I had this made from the fabric of that dress," he said, fastening it around her neck. "The one that started everything. I want you to remember that you were never truly invisible, Clara. You just needed someone to really look." "And you were never truly a monster," Clara countered, her fingers tracing the pendant. "You just needed someone to see the man beneath the reputation." They danced on the empty penthouse floor. No music except what they made between them. Two people who'd survived impossible odds and chosen each other over safety, over sanity, over everything. "Do you ever regret it?" Adrian asked, the question he'd asked 100 times over the years. "Never," Clara answered, the answer that was always true. Not for a single moment. Not even the terrifying parts? Especially not the terrifying parts, because they led here, to this, to us. Adrian kissed her as the city lights glittered around them, and Clara thought about fate and choice and the strange alchemy that transforms strangers into everything. She'd walked into a party wearing a red dress and walked out into a new life. She'd been kidnapped, threatened, terrorized, and saved. She'd fallen in love with danger and discovered it had a heartbeat. And she'd built something real from the ashes of violence, a family, a future, a love that had started as madness and become the sanest thing in her world. Years later, when Anna was grown and asking about how her parents met, Clara would smile and tell her the truth. "I was nobody," she'd say. "Just a girl no one noticed, living a life that felt like sleepwalking. And then I met your father, and everything changed. It wasn't safe, it wasn't easy, and it definitely wasn't smart. But it was real. And sometimes, real is worth every risk." Adrian would add his own version, about a woman in a red dress who'd walked past him and shattered every wall he'd built, who'd chosen to stay when any rational person would have run, who'd transformed a crime lord into a husband and father. And Anna would listen to their love story, dangerous and beautiful and absolutely true, and understand that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places, that invisibility is its own kind of death. That love, real love, requires courage, and that choosing each other every single day is the bravest thing two people can do. Clara Bennett had spent 26 years being no one, and then she'd become everything that mattered to a man who'd thought he was beyond redemption. They'd saved each other in the end, and they'd built a life worth fighting for, worth surviving for, worth everything they'd endured to get here. Together. Always together. That was how their story ended, or perhaps how it truly began.